Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and I have with me today Incumbent Alderman, 6th Ward, Tom Suffredin.
Hi, Malika. How are you?
All right. I have such a problem saying 6th Ward.
Right. Well, that's one of the things maybe we should talk about is the next council is going to redraw the map, and maybe we should reconsider how many wards we have and how we do that.
Oh,
But we can get there naturally later, and we don't have to kick off with that.
wow, that'd be interesting for them to rename the areas.
Yeah, well, it's something we should all talk about as a community. I don't know that 9 wards drawn the way they are with aldermen representing one individual ward is necessarily the best way to do it. I don't know that it's not, but I think it's something we should talk about. Maybe having fewer wards and some aldermen who are elected at large, for example, might be a different approach that makes sense. With a lot of the services that people expect from the city, that goes through 311 or goes through the city generally. So, the ward boundaries aren't necessary for the providing services, and trying to figure out how people balance the interests of their wards that they represent and the community as a whole, to get a better government product for everybody. It's possible that fewer defined geographic wards with more at-large representation would make more sense. And we should look at, that's one of the things we should look at when we're looking at redrawing the map, because with the census, we're gonna be tasked with redrawing the map anyway. So it's something, you get to do every 10 years, and it's worth taking a look and seeing if it makes sense to make some adjustments to how we've done things in the past.
Okay. Well, Tom, I look forward to speaking with you because you are a straight shooter. You do not sugarcoat. You get straight to the point. You tell it like it is. Um,
Yeah, sometimes it gets me in trouble, but I try and be straightforward and honest as much as possible. I think that's the best policy.
well, people appreciate that. I mean, the people have been crying for transparency, and there's only a few people up there on the council who actually give us transparency.
Well, I appreciate that you consider me one of those people, and I think that's one of the big issues that'll be before us in this next election. We saw some of that last night, and I think it's one thing as a topic during election season, but we really need to see a commitment to some measurable goals and measurable ways to show that we've increased transparency, whoever is on the next council. We already know who the next mayor will be, and we know that transparency is one of his big campaign issues, and it's something that he's been committed to in his prior elected positions. So he has a track record of pushing forward transparency, and we should really talk about what that means. And in my experience these last 4 years, transparency isn't just about citizens having to go on this hunt to play gotcha games with what the government is doing on their behalf. I mean, we can eliminate the need for transparency a lot by being more upfront and honest on the front end, rather than making decisions and then having people trying to figure out what led to those after the fact. So I'm very optimistic that the next 4 years, there'll be a move towards greater transparency. A lot of that work has been started, and I think that if you look at the pool of candidates and the things that they're talking about, there's good reason to believe that will continue with the next council and mayor.
Okay, have you and let's see, do I call him Mayor Senator Daniel Biss? Mayor Biss.
Yeah, Mayor-elect Daniel Biss. Yes, I spoke to him today. He has probably had one of the best days you can have of accepting congratulations from a lot of people. I think that campaign was very well run on his part. I think that Sebastian Knowles and Lori Keenan brought forward important issues and elevated the discussion. As we were talking before we started recording, I think there's a unique opportunity here with a mayor who was elected with 75% of the vote to have 2 months of time to sort of establish how he wants to approach things when he and the new council are sworn in May. So I'm very optimistic about things going forward. But I think also, this present council has some unfinished business to get done. And I want to make sure that we get that done before we hand it over to the next council, which may or may not contain some of the same people. I'm hopeful it will contain, in addition to Alderman Fleming, who's running unopposed, at least one other member of the current council. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think Mayor Biss, I don't think he realized how divided the community was. Like, he was aware of a lot of the issues going on in Evanston, but he was not aware of such a divide in the community. And so that he said that's something he definitely wants to work on.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying, I mean, and I wasn't 4 years ago. I was surprised when we started, and I think we, the council and the mayor, brought some of that on ourselves with the way that we got off on the wrong foot with the minimum wage, the attempt that some members made to opt out of increasing the minimum wage. I think that really led to a lot of distrust. And then Harley Clark, there were a lot of points where there was just an increase in distrust. And I think that's one of the jobs of the new council. That's what there's why transparency and honesty are going to be so important, is for the people who really frequently participate in our process to whether or not they agree with the decisions, to at least understand how we arrive at them and feel that they were heard. Whether or not they got the outcome they wanted, is it matters. Nobody's thrilled when it's like, well, I've been heard, but I didn't get what I want. But at the same time, at least you can respect that the decision was made with your input. And so, we have to figure out ways to really increase that in the next council. I think, depending on how it all shakes out, there will be a lot of people that are committed to that. And that's going to be a good thing. I think that's one of the, also, I know I'm being long-winded, but one of the advantages of people kind of becoming more accustomed to using remote meeting technology like Zoom. It affords people an opportunity to follow meetings without having to leave their families or go out in weather and sit through all sorts of things. It's something you can have going on in the background. It's something you can pay attention to. And, with that new reality, I think we can do a lot to increase participation. I would like us to spread the amount of time from when the packet comes out to when the meeting happens. We do right now, the packet comes out on a Thursday for a Monday meeting. I think over time we could stretch that. So maybe it comes out on the prior Thursday for a Monday meeting. So you have a 10-day period of public review of what's on the agenda. I think we should be more mindful of issues that we know are going to be contentious and maybe give a little bit more lead time on those, because I think that's one of the complaints that people have, is that the agendas are occasionally packed with multiple issues that take up a lot of time. And some people may believe that that's by design in order to wear people down. So, all those things we can improve in the next council. And I think there'll be a commitment to do that.
Okay, now you haven't been one to bite your tongue, and like you said, sometimes some people don't like that, some people appreciate that. I think in this day and time, people more so appreciate that. You have called some of the aldermen out, Ann Rainey being one, for being Ann Rainey.
Right.
So people have come to appreciate that about you.
Well, it's interesting. And again, this is something I wasn't really fully aware of when I first started. That there's a cultural aspect to the city council where, and there's a lot of things about it, but where there's this sense of detachment sometimes. The first time I heard somebody talk about those of us on the dais, I was like, that's the most ridiculous statement ever. It's a work table. It's 2 steps up. It's not like you become a magic person when you get there. And I think, it's important, again, to be, everyone's lived experience in Evanston isn't identical, but we're all dealing with the same stuff. So people get frustrated and insulted when you tell them things like, parking isn't an issue, or the roads aren't in poor shape right now. When everyone, and in this case, obviously after a winter storm, it's going to take some time to patch up potholes. But I mean, that when you don't tell people the truth, it puts them on the defensive. And if we just skip that step on everything that we do, and I'm hopeful that we will going forward. And it's something that I try and do, and I will work. I'm working at being better and more civil in everything that I do as well.
Well, hey, when you care, you care. And if people aren't listening, because I see sometimes the community feels like the council doesn't listen to them, but I see sometimes the aldermen too feel like the other aldermen aren't really listening to them as well. So
Yeah.
What, Tom, what are your thoughts on how the city budget has been dealt? I know you were the voice that woke the council up in that, hello, we're going through a pandemic. Why are you immediately going to raise the property tax? So you made the council go back to the drawing board. Let's come up with some ideas. Let's do something different. We're in a crazy time right now. You can't just do the budget the way you've always done it, just raise property taxes and keep it moving. What do you feel should be done differently going forward? I mean, we're coming out, well, we're still in crazy times, but hopefully we're coming out of it soon.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to be really responsible and forthright about our financial condition, and we need to have that discussion. It's unfortunate the next council will be sworn in May, and I think that's when that discussion needs to start. This last budget process, we got to the end, and we were, that last meeting, we were making decisions not to purchase vehicles and do whatever we could to eliminate some of the cost to balance the budget. And minimize the property tax increase that was included. But the reality is the money's got to come from somewhere. And, this past year, we didn't get a lot of revenue that we had anticipated. And it did demonstrate our vulnerability. I mean, everyone's vulnerability on a personal and institutional level was demonstrated this last year, but it demonstrated our reliance upon tax sources that are dependent on things happening that just were not happening. So we really need to make sure that as we approach our next budget, we have discussions about how we may have to sell some assets or things that we have to do. We got to be really honest about it and measured and make sure that process builds to a budget in November and December, rather than kind of this abrupt budgeting process at the end of the year. So, I know that my colleagues have in the past been recalcitrant about holding Northwestern more accountable to their the expenses that they bring to the city. Alderman Rainey, to her credit, really pushed for them to pay the exact cost of their fire service. I think that's something that we need to look at. I think the Good Neighbor Fund is inadequate, but we're pretending like it is, and we should be grateful for what they give us. And I think that's a institutional mentality that needs to change. And I think we just got to be honest about what our fiscal condition is and what services we may need to scale back and what things are essential. And, when you look at our budget as it relates to public safety and public works and the important things that people expect from municipal government, we got to make sure that we can deliver those services, but we got to do it as responsibly as possible and understand that people are not in a position where they can limitlessly withstand property tax increases, because that's one of the big things we talk about is affordability, but we talk about it in a way like the decisions that we make in terms of taxes don't have any effect on it, and it's a complete disconnect that we need to change. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of what happened with this year's budget. I thought to even propose a budget with a property tax increase in it was irresponsible, and then for that property tax increase's purpose to be to increase our reserve balance to make us look more appealing to rating agencies so that we can borrow more money is something that was really difficult to tell people. That's what we're doing. We're going to take money out of your pocket to put it on a shelf so we can borrow more money so that you can pay that back later during a pandemic where your personal financial situation may have changed dramatically. So that's why I pushed back on that. And I'm hopeful that we can be more intentional this year in the budgeting process.
Mhm. Well, many people appreciate you speaking out against them raising the property taxes, just being so quick to want to raise the property taxes. Like that's always the go-to. Why is that? Why is that the go-to?
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is, the city's portion of the property tax bill is relatively small. It's about 17%. So, it's very easy if you're just looking at the city piece to say there's room to increase the city piece of your property tax bill, but we really got to take into account the total cumulative effect of all the taxing bodies, District 202, 65, Cook County, they all add up to some really substantial tax burdens for people. And then there was the reassessment, which hit a lot of people. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of sympathy for people who live in giant houses and have giant tax bills. And although like some of those are insane, I mean, you have somebody who tells you that they pay $31,000 a year in property taxes. That's substantial. I mean, that's just like the cost of living in your own home. And that's not a problem, but it's also the people who live in much more modest homes and are looking at tax bills in like the $12,000 range. I mean, that's $1,000 a month. And, with the change in federal law, that's not all deductible. And that's a really big deal to people. And it threatens the stability of our community because it does lead to a lot of people. And I'm sure people like this who, once my youngest graduates from ETHS, I'm out of here, or, that. And then there's a lot of that. And, one of the great things about Evanston is that people who are here generally stay here. And, I've found that the reason when people leave is it's not entirely voluntary, and it's usually because the cost of living here is so high. And it's not the cost of acquisition of property, it's the cost of maintaining your property and paying all the taxes and fees that come along with living here. And for us to minimize that as a council is tone deaf and something that plays into what we talked about before, where there's a disconnect between residents and elected officials.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of property, you have spoken out, well, not spoken out, but you voted no against reparations. But you gave an explanation for why you voted no. You explained that there was no plan in place. $10 million and no plan, things can go crazy, which seems to be
Yeah.
what's kind of happening right now. You have people well, there are community members who have been attending the reparation meetings regular. I mean, every meeting they haven't missed. And they've expressed that they do not want a housing program since the day the subcommittee decided that's the direction they wanted to go in. And then now you have more community members who are waking up like, wait, what's happening? I got to get qualified by a bank to get reparations? How does a mortgage and reparations even come together? But you had voted no because there needed to be a plan behind something so major.
Right. And, Malika, I did, there were two votes as it pertains to reparations. There was the vote, like, should we study this and come up with a feasibility plan? And I voted yes on that. That's a values vote. We should do that. That is something that we should do as a community. But then the vote to move forward without, and you said $10 million, we also don't have $10 million. We have $10 million anticipated from cannabis revenue. And, as we saw with what we talked about earlier, you can't count on future money like that, particularly with an emerging industry like we have. So I was a no, and I've taken heat for it, and I've explained it, many times. It's not that I'm opposed to reparations. I'm opposed to going forward without a plan. And one of the big elements of understanding what our total obligation will be is knowing how many residents will be eligible. And that's another piece that we don't know. I know the survey went out, and that's something that we're going to learn. But at $25,000 and $10 million anticipated, that's only 400 eligible residents that would be able to receive a payment, whatever form it is, if it's in a business grant or if it has to do with residential assistance that's being talked about. But the reality is, the population that's going to be eligible is most likely much, much higher. And if it's 4,000 people, that's $100 million. And like, where are we going to come up with that? And so, I do have concerns about how we're funding it, because that's money that's going to come in over time, but everyone who's eligible is equally eligible at the moment that they're eligible. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to prioritize people? That was one of the discussions on Sunday. Then to your point, there are people who don't either need housing money or want housing money. The using real estate to build wealth model only works if the real estate appreciates. And the real estate only appreciates if the tax burden in Evanston doesn't become so unmanageable that people don't want to live here. So there's a lot of interconnected pieces to this that we need to make sure that we understand before we go forward with things. And I know there's work being done. I'm supportive of the work. I think that something will come before council in March. Sunday we talked about there are people who are likely to be opposed to whatever comes forward in March, but endeavoring to do the work is great, but I really want to be part of a community that successfully implements it. And I'm afraid that in our lack of planning, we are diminishing the likelihood that this will be successful. And that's my concern. And that's why I voted no when it came forward to set aside the $10 million, because I don't know how long it's going to take us to get $10 million. None of us do. And so that's the concern. We're going to have to find other sources of revenue to put towards this fund. I know that there's going to be private donations, but then, at a certain point, private donations, while they're fantastic, then it ceases to be a government program. And that's the purpose of this. And Alderman Fleming addressed that on Sunday as well. And she said, there will need to be pain in the budget for this if this is truly going to be a government program. And that's true. And that's something that we're going to need to talk about, particularly as we start looking at the potential sale of assets and other sources of income that will come in large chunks. What we do with that money is critical, and it is very important for the future stability of this program and our entire city's fiscal position.
Well, your reasoning for voting no, we're actually seeing it play out right now, because yes, you do have members, quite a few members of the community who are very upset with the way that it's going to roll out. And as far as that survey, I did the survey yesterday or day before. I did the survey, and the survey is 16 questions. It stopped me at question number 10. Okay. It would not let me go any further because I would not select what kind of housing program I wanted. If I wanted a mortgage, if I wanted assistance buying property, I didn't want any of those choices, because to me, that's not reparations. So it wouldn't allow me to go further. And it gave me the notification in red. You have to select one of these, or you couldn't go forward. So I'm like, well, how accurate is this survey? Because it's forcing people to say, I want a housing program. Right. So then I did contact the city and I said, this survey is misleading. And I'm concerned with what the results are going to be when the council goes to vote in March on this. And so the person that sent the survey to me said, oh, let me fix that. So they fixed question number 10 so that you can move past it if you don't want a housing program. But I'm one of the later people to even get the survey. So think of all the other people that got the survey and they probably just checked something just so that they can move forward, but they really don't want a housing program.
Right. So the way that it was fixed is that there's just like a button you can click that says like none of the above or something, or
no, the person didn't even put a skip or none of the above. It was just, you just have to figure out to press continue.
Okay.
Yeah, but before that, it would not allow you to even finish it unless you wanted a housing program.
Okay. Well, and I mean, that's one of the concerns is really like in an environment with escalating property taxes and a lot of older homes, $25,000, while it's a substantial amount of money, isn't like the difference between something being affordable and unaffordable on a long-term basis. I mean, that's, 2 unexpected repairs and 5 years of escalating property taxes. I mean, so I want to be wrong. right? I mean, I want to make sure that that's clear. I'm not, there's no satisfaction in seeing my concerns come to fruition. I want this to work. I think as a community, we have put our reputation forward in a way where it has to work and we have to make it work. But I do share the concerns that you express and the concerns that were expressed on Sunday in terms of how we're going to make it work and how we're going to put it in the best possible position to work. And then to your point, what other options will be available to people besides housing? Because I think while housing is important and something that many people would want to take advantage of, to your point, there are a lot of other things that maybe would suit other people's situations better. And then, as a final point, the real emphasis needs to be on older people who are, who directly lived this, and in a lot of situations they don't want or need housing grants. So what do we do? How do we make sure that they're prioritized first and that this is tailored to meet needs of theirs? So I know the work will continue. I have confidence that we will get there, and I'm proud of Evanston for starting. I just wish that maybe we would have started from in a more informed place and increase the likelihood of success.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. And we are concerned about the vote in March. I think I've spoken to just about every alderman on the council about how members of the community really feel about it, that they would rather have a cash payment, like the Japanese had their reparation, the Jewish had their reparation after the Holocaust. So why is it that the Black community has to take out a mortgage and get qualified for their reparations, where others have received payments for their home?
Well, it's an absolutely fair question, and I'll confess not being an expert on like the legal ramifications and what the law department's role has been in trying to figure out what is something that may withstand a potential court challenge. But my understanding on direct cash payments, as it was explained in one of our council meetings, is that that would create a tax liability, and that was presented as a reason not to do it. But I don't know that that was laid out for the community as something to consider and to make a decision as to whether you would be willing to accept a cash payment with a tax liability attached to it. So, I don't know, Malika, when we're talking about on important issues, maybe we have 10 days. I think like the meeting in March, like having that packet hit on Thursday and that meeting happen on a Monday, that might be an example where you'd want to have an extra week of public examination so that we could have a more informed discussion at council. Because the other thing that I think creates some of the distrust that we talked about is on these big issues where many people come out to speak. We stick to our 45 minutes of public comment time, and we have 110 speakers. Everyone gets only a few seconds to express their point of view, and there's got to be a way that we can do that better as well. So we'll see what happens in March, but I certainly appreciate all the issues that you brought up, and I'm hopeful that as a community we can work them all out. But the main thing, no matter what we do, is we have to make sure that we fund it, and we have to have a realistic timetable for funding it, and we have to have a realistic target for what the level of government funding will be. So hopefully the survey will help us get closer to figuring that out as well.
Well, the survey is flawed, so keep that in mind.
Okay. Yeah, but yeah, no, and I think that's going to be something. I think we need when we look at the survey results, just in terms of total population. I mean, that's something to keep in mind. How many people in your situation we're trying to often just stop filling out the survey and then aren't recorded as we're trying to figure out the total population that would be eligible under the criteria that have been set. So yeah, we can always do better. Absolutely.
So we'll get off reparations because we can go on and on and on about that. But one point to the taxes, I did speak to someone who was a CPA, and he was like, "Oh, there's ways around not being taxed on reparations." It's like,
Yeah.
oh, you can find a way for an entire community not to be taxed on reparations.
Okay.
But that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
So another huge concern, of course, is the vaccine and COVID-19. I did speak with the mayoral candidates about this, because the Black and Brown community are affected by COVID uh, disproportionately. We've heard all the numbers and the stats, and you know, it's it's tragic. Um, my question is, I know the city doesn't have control over how much vaccine is coming in. You just have to use what's sent to us. But why aren't the ones who are dying at a higher rate? Why aren't they the ones first to get vaccinated? And can we
Yeah,
fix
so
that?
on Monday at our meeting, it was expressed that it's anticipated there'll be a lot more supply in March, and so that will solve that issue. In terms of your question about the priority of distribution, the health director has done, I believe, a very good job of dealing with, what challenges he has before him. I in the last several weeks, like the most common email or phone call I get is from a resident who is on a borderline of a qualification and wants to know, when are we going to get to 72-year-olds? Or, I'm a teacher, when will I get my turn? And we just haven't had the supply at the city to do anything about it. It's a fair question in terms of how this has been distributed, and a lot of that was determined at the state level with the categories. I think Evanston's done a very good job with what we have available to prioritize people appropriately. But I've heard a lot of stories of people going very far to get access to vaccines. So to your question, I think that it's really a question at the state level, and I think there's been a intention to prioritize things, but the execution has been really stymied by the lack of supply. But I will say that Ike Obo, who's our director of health, has done an excellent job with what challenges have been presented before him. I asked the question on Monday about prioritization of staff versus residents, and I think that we've gotten our essential staff vaccinated. The mayor was included in that at the health director's discretion, and now we can really spread out to our vulnerable seniors, and then hopefully we can get through to enough people that we can have a return to normalcy sometime this summer. But that's all just optimism and hope, and it's all about whether or not we're able to execute it. And I have confidence that we will. But it's been rough because we're so close to the end. I think everybody thinks that once we get more shots in arms, we're going to be able to get back to normalcy. And I know there's a lot of people who have really had a rough year. So, to answer your question, I think the prioritization at the state was done, with limited supply in mind, and the city's executed getting out our supplies. But it's another thing that we could have probably done better, and hopefully we will do better as we get more vaccines.
Mhm. I know we have a couple guests on here. If anyone has a question, feel free to put your question in the chat, and I will call on you to ask Alderman Suffredin your question. That brings me to our movie theater. Everything is changing so fast. Goodness
Yeah.
gracious.
Yeah, that's going to be a big hole in downtown for as long as it's a hole in downtown. I have confidence in our economic development staff's ability to attract another theater operator, but that's going to take a while. I think all the things that we took for granted pre-COVID, just the thought of how being in a windowless room with a bunch of strangers for a 4-hour period is like something you can't even imagine. That theater site was a victim of COVID plus decisions made by out-of-state companies. And I think that if there are going to be movie theaters, that's a great location for a movie theater, and that is something that we will be able to attract an operator to. It's just a matter of how long that'll be. And then to the earlier point, that's the type of cascading effect that we have. That theater led to a lot of tax revenue and a lot of restaurant sales and parking revenue, which is another whole issue that we could talk about, the way the city approaches parking. But when you take the movie theater out of the equation, none of that happens. And if you look at our downtown right now, it's just another reason that used to exist to go downtown that will not exist until we fill that. So, there's a lot of opportunity in some of those vacancies, but with the theater in particular, like we're really, it's got to have to be a movie operator, and that's just going to take time. But I have great faith in economic development. I have great faith in Paul Zalmazak that if there's somebody out there who wants that space, that he will do everything he can to facilitate that agreement being reached with the landlord.
Okay, and the Civic Center. Now, many believe that the decision's already been made to move the Civic Center downtown Evanston where the public library is.
Yeah.
So parking is definitely going to be an issue. I mean, uh, especially for council meetings. I mean, we're not there for like 10 minutes,
Right.
there for hours. So is that going to deter people, the community, from coming out to participate in the council meetings?
Yeah, well, I mean, I will say, no decision's been made by the city council. So I know there's been a lot of discussion and there's been a lot of exploration of options, but there's never been a vote of the council. And that's, even though we're in a form of government where city management has a lot of latitude, that this is one where the council still gets to say something. So, the reality of the Civic Center is that it's a 100-year-old building that was designed for a completely different purpose. If we're going to commit to staying there, we're going to have to commit to a series of repairs that are going to be expensive, and that's something the community could choose to commit to. But also, once it's done, we just have a repaired 100-year-old building that was designed for another purpose. This may be an opportunity to put some of the functions of government downtown, and then some of the functions of government somewhere else. I mean, that's another thing that was part of the Jones-Lang-LaSalle report on all of our assets is, do we need to have all of our government employees in one place? We have a lot of non-public facing employees who do jobs that don't require interaction with the public. They could be in an office building separate from the Civic Center, or somewhere else. But to your point, we do also need a place to have council meetings. We need a place for people to pay their bills, all the other interactions you have with the city government, and those need to happen in a place that's accessible by transit, which right now, our current Civic Center is not super accessible by transit. That's one of the downsides of its current location. It's not exactly centrally located, and it also, to your point, parking has got to be available and free, or at a rate that doesn't make it exorbitant for you to attend a 6-hour meeting, because that has a chilling effect on people's participation in their government. This isn't going to happen, but like if I was playing a game where I could design and put it wherever I would put it in the middle of the Dempster and Dodge shopping center. I think that's the best location geographically. I think it has enough parking, and it would really cement Dodge's position as the spine of our city, where you would have premier city assets at all the main corners of Dodge. You'd have the high school at Church and Dodge. You would have the Civic Center at Dempster Dodge. You would have Crowder Crown at Main and Dodge. You would have James Park at roughly Oakton and Dodge. And that would be what if we were starting over and we were playing a fantasy game. That's where I would put the Civic Center. But it's a discussion that we have to have among the community, because to your point, I think a lot of people say, well, but this is a done deal. It's going to the library anyway, right? And they feel like there was a complete shortchanging of a public process. So we need to have a public process. We need to try and have it be as rational and emotionless as possible, and figure out what makes financial sense for the next 50 to 100 years for the city of Evanston. And that may or may not be maintaining the location on Ridge Avenue and making improvements. So it's a discussion that will have to be had by the next council. I hope that we get to it early and get to it thoroughly, because it can't be another one of these things that drags out with no resolution, because it's costing money to just tread water with the current Civic Center as is.
Interesting. I got you for 5 more minutes. I wanted to tell you too, Tom, when I was in Springfield, I was there for the hearing to push the bills, well, at that time it was just one bill, HB 4954, for Black History expansion. And I ran into you, and it was great to see a familiar face all the way out in Springfield. And you were so supportive, because I was I had never experienced anything like that ever in my life, and I was about to testify, and you were like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Just, So I never got to thank you because you calmed my nerves because I was like on pins and needles. Like, how's this going to work? I was new to that entire process, um, but you calmed my nerves.
Well, and you did a great job, and your bill passed. So everything went exactly as it was supposed to go. So it
Yeah.
all worked.
Yes, I appreciate that. And I've learned so much about how government works on the state level and definitely here in Evanston. And that is a tough job that you all have, that the aldermen have. That is a tough job.
Yeah. Well, although kind of putting a bow on everything we talked about at the beginning, I think that city council and city manager has made it tougher than it needs to be sometimes with some of the ways that we do things and our reluctance to change some of our policies and procedures. And I think that's one of the next council's big, I don't even want to call it a challenge, because I think it's pretty simple, is to recalibrate this so it's more resident focused and more accessible, and figure out ways to have public input and public comment, make decisions. We talked about the length of our meetings and like the discussions that happen among aldermen. I mean, my experience has been that there isn't really debate. It's just like these siloed soliloquies, and nobody's trying to advocate for a position or convince anybody of anything. They're just making these speeches about whatever issue we're talking about, and then we vote. And it was just a lot of time spent that could have been better spent moving on to the next agenda item and getting the people's business done. Because there's a lot of things that we spend a lot of time on that aren't really critical issues, and a lot of the administrative functions of government don't even necessarily require much discussion or debate. About the purchase of chemicals for the water treatment plant, that's not a policy thing. I mean, the water treatment staff tells us what they need and we do it, but we just take way too long to get a lot of the people's business done. And I think we could do it much better. And I'm optimistic that that'll be one of the new mayor's top priorities, and that the relatively new city manager still deserves a fair chance to implement some of those things and change some of the staff culture. And I think that's something that can happen, but it really requires engaged residents to stay on top of their elected officials and make sure that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle with other things that may or may not be as important.
Mhm. Mhm. Erica's story. Do you see a difference between working with Wally and working with Erica Storley?
Yeah, I mean, they're very different people. I actually think very highly of Erica Storley as a person, and I think she has great potential as a city manager. I think the process by which she was hired was bogus, but that doesn't delegitimize her as someone who could be a skilled manager for the city of Evanston. But I think it was faux public input that led to that hiring decision. But I think she deserves an opportunity to succeed. I think she, as a person who lives here voluntarily, unlike previous city managers who we paid to move here, she brings a perspective that is shared by a lot of residents. And I'm hopeful that she and the new mayor will click, and that they'll lay out an agenda that's achievable and measurable, and put forth a realistic timeline to achieve some of these things that we've been talking about tonight.
Mm. Okay, our time is up, but one more question.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to be a different experience for Erica Storley if there's I believe some of the aldermen are going to remain, and I believe some are definitely not going to be there anymore. Do you think that changes how she handles the city budget, how she deals a lot of the decisions in Evanston based on the new blood, the new energy of a council?
Well, I think she's very skilled, and she'll be able to adapt to the council that is sworn in May, however it's configured. I think it's probably always there's a period of feeling out, new coworkers. And I think trying to figure out exactly what people's priorities are and how they want to work together will be something that she's going to have to do. I would hope that one of the first meetings of the next council will be a public meeting where we lay out our goals and our timelines for achieving things, and not in a way so we can put a poster on the wall and talk about our council goals, but like actually have them be specific and measurable, and lay out expectations that the residents can have of this council. Whether or not they agree from the outset on how to get to these goals is like, it's unlikely that nobody ran as a slate, so people have differences of opinion. But I think Erica will be able to work with whomever's elected. I think that one of her skills is that she's able to be collaborative and she's able to read people well. And I think that she is certainly going to be capable of being a good city manager for the city of Evanston, and we'll be able to work with whomever's elected.
Thank you so much. One, I want you to let everyone know how they can contact you if they have further questions. And then two, we had such a low voter turnout for the primary, like 10% of the city turned out. I don't know what that was about, but what is your message to Evanstonians who did not come out, that 90% that did not come out to vote? What is your message to them?
Yeah, so I have a website, tomsuffredin.org. You can reach me by email there at tom@tomsuffredin.org. I have a Facebook page as well. And I'm also out and about in the community frequently. So, always feel free to talk to me. I think in terms of turnout, the amount of engagement that people have over the next 4 years or over the previous 4 years, is really meaningless unless they actually engage on this part of the process. And so I'm hopeful that there will be more people. I mean, school board elections are important as well. And, there's probably some steam taken out of the likelihood of high turnout because of the lack of a mayoral election. And there are a lot of people who really want to vote for the headliner and don't want to go too far down. But I mean, I think it'll be a very short ballot. So with early voting starting March 22nd, there's plenty of time and opportunity for people to make their voices heard, and I hope that everyone will.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much, Alderman Suffredin. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Malika. It's always a pleasure to catch up. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Yes, yes, yes. The door is always open.
All right. Well, you have a good night, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mrs. Malika, Evanston Live TV. That was incumbent Alderman, 6th Ward Alderman, Tom Suffredin. And like I told you, he tells it like it is. He's a straight shooter. No dancing around the questions, nothing. He just answers it. So you all be sure to reach out to him if you have more questions. I'll be sure to put his contact information in the description of this post, and stay engaged, you all. And those of you who didn't get out to vote for the primary, please get out to vote for the general election. Your voice counts, it matters, and we want positive, great leaders in Evanston. We have some already, and we have some who aren't so great. So you all got to get out there, okay? Get out there and learn all about these candidates. Stay tuned for more here on Evanston Live TV.